Hello, hello, true crime fans. Welcome back to For Criming Out Loud. This is our bedtime series called Crime Me to Sleep, and we've been reading While Idaho Slept. This will be the 16th and final episode, so if you're new here, please make sure you subscribe so you can go into the playlist and start the book from the very beginning. Let's get into episode 16, the final episode of While Idaho Slept. Epilogue. By mid-spring, flowers had bloomed along the edges of 1122 King Road. A sky-blue security shed the size of a small snow cone shack had been wheeled onto the property atop a utility trailer and had now replaced the police-style vehicles that had been guarding the house from looky-loos for months. The shack had a small air conditioning unit and light gray cinder blocks pushed against the wheels of its trailer to keep it from rolling downhill, the on-site security guard with it. The property had been donated by its owner to the University of Idaho, whose administrators planned to tear it down within the year. There was talk of building a small memorial on the location, and also talk of simply leaving the property bare, perhaps seeded with grass that would thicken over time. Whatever would become of the spot, there was a sense of urgency related to starting over in whatever ways possible. Perhaps the teardown would happen after Brian Kohberger's trial, some speculated. Jurors should have an opportunity to review the crime scene in person. Administrators from the university were tight-lipped about a specific date for the structure's demolition, but had said they wanted it removed before the incoming fall semester. Nobody doubted that the house would eventually be destroyed, but not from the collective memory of those who had been touched by the crimes that had occurred inside of it. Judging by media traffic related to the King Road case, the numbers affected were in the millions. The temperature in Moscow on May 14th, 2023, the day of spring commencement, was a perfect 79 degrees. The sun shone through a clear blue sky, and a light breeze carried the scent of blossoms from the university's many gardens and from the purple lilacs that would soon be humming with bees. At the 9 a.m. ceremony inside the university's 140-foot-tall Kibbe Dome Arena, Maddie Mogan was posthumously awarded her business degree. She would have graduated on this day had she lived to do so. In front of a crowd of thousands filling the arena seats and ground-level rows of elbow-to-elbow students dressed in black graduation regalia, her mother and stepfather walked on stage to accept a copy of her bound and embossed diploma book. Her stepfather took tenuous breaths, and Maddie's mother held tightly to his arm. They shook hands with the president of the university, and Maddie's mother smiled with pride, blinking back tears. The couple was followed by Maddie's father, who accepted an identical copy. At a subsequent 2 p.m. ceremony on that same day, again in front of thousands, Kaylee's 4 siblings walked on stage to accept a diploma on her behalf. Kaylee had been scheduled to graduate with her degree in general studies just weeks after the murders. Now her 3 sisters were dressed in church clothes, and her brother in shorts and a ball cap, just an Idaho boy after all, to bring home a symbol of Kaylee's hard work for the mantle. Her sister Olivia, as Maddie's mother had done earlier, smiled proudly through fluttering eyelashes. It came as a surprise to most in attendance that an additional posthumous degree in sociology and criminology was awarded that day. It was given to the family of a young woman named Lupita Ruiz. 5 adults and a toddler took the stage on Lupita's behalf. They stood solemnly, the toddler asleep against the chest of one of the men. Another of the men held a poster-sized photograph of Lupita in a frame. The young woman had died at 21 of injuries inflicted in a car crash. Death had not only come to the families of the King Road victims that year. The reminder seemed to settle heavily across the thousands of faces in attendance. Life is fragile, and it doesn't take a murderer to cut one's time short. After the ceremony, which lasted under 2 hours, graduates poured through the exits of the Kibble Dome, the Kibbe Dome, with the tassels of their graduation caps having been flipped from one side to the other, that well-known symbol of beginning a new chapter in life. Outside, the campus grounds had mostly been emptied of students, but it wasn't the kind of emptiness that was felt during the many weeks before a suspect was arrested. Now, the walkways were lined with flowers and effervescent with the energy of living things that clicked and buzzed from the grass. By then, Kaylee and Jack's golden doodle, Murphy, had his own Instagram page, curated by Jack Decor, and with more than 100,000 followers. Murphy posted mostly selfies, with comments like, "This is a throwback photo of me. My mom loved this one." He was a puppy in early photos, fully grown later. And the city of Moscow had its own surfeit of new followers now, but it didn't much seem to care or necessarily need them. It was hard to be known for something horrible when what it was built on had been something great. The smell of ponderosa from the nearby mountains drifted into the valley now that the weather was warm again, and a rush of clean air coursed through the heart of downtown, where customers of the popular organic food co-op and hipster gym rats mingled contentedly with old-school Idahoans born in Moscow, back when most of the coffee was still drunk black. Across the sprawling green field on campus, 2 groups of students, mostly young men, played a pickup rugby game on this warm graduation day. It was shirts against skins, and half of them had thrown their t-shirts toward the edges of the freshly mowed grass. They ran up and down the field, laughing in the sunlight. One of them jogged to his girlfriend on the sidelines and kissed her, then lifted her into the air, not without struggling. They fell into a heap together. There was a steady but slow stream of traffic heading out of town. It sounded like water flowing. Across the field, 3 young women wordlessly bumped a volleyball between them with almost perfect form, country music playing from a Bluetooth speaker lying in the grass beside one of their backpacks, and a knocked-over clear water bottle that caught the sunlight and refracted it. Life. That's what was happening. And nobody would take that for granted again. So that concludes the book While Idaho Slept. But I'm going to talk a little bit off the cuff here because it is now March of 2025. And I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that a lot of you following this case know that more information has come out since this book was written. And there have been pretrial hearings. There's actually been a change of venue and a new judge assigned, Judge Hippler. And also with these pretrial hearings, there have been a few changes in the information that none of us had, and that clearly the author of the book didn't have at the time. So I do acknowledge that, and because of that, I do want to go ahead and read these couple pages. These are actually the author's note on sources and methods that were used to write the book. So I'm going to conclude the episode with reading the author's notes so you can tell kind of where his thought process came from and where he got his information and that type of thing. So here goes. Author's note on sources and methods. In reconstructing events, I relied on the many publicly available law enforcement and legal documents related to this case, as well as on interviews I conducted. Interviews conducted by other reporters, online resources such as mapping or weather reports, publicly available video, court documents from the state of Idaho, Washington, and Pennsylvania, and a variety of other sources. Notable reconstructed events include the time frame surrounding the night of the King Road homicides, in which I utilized documents submitted by law enforcement agencies identifying and detailing cell phone data, neighborhood security camera footage in audio and video format, traffic camera footage, license plate reader results, and law enforcement body cam footage. Throughout the pages where I quote a subject directly without attribution to a third-party source, those quotes were provided directly to me by the subject being interviewed, including my interviews with surviving family members of the victims and their associates, and associates of Bryan Kohberger. Those instances are further identified by a shift to present tense. Example, the subject of the interview says instead of said. That seemed the most reasonable way of distinguishing my personal interviews without placing myself in the narrative. In instances where I relied on specific reporting from other news sources, those sources were identified at least once in the context of that information being presented. Notable instances include interviews conducted with surviving family members of the victims, law enforcement entities, associates of the victims, and associates of Bryan Kohberger. In instances where I relied on database research, including social media mining, any quotes, descriptions, locations, or observations made were based on what was available on public databases or public social media profiles. Notable instances include the reconstruction of events in the lives of the King Road homicide victims, with additional inclusion of their extended family, associates, and other entities or persons who may have appeared in publicly posted snapshots, events, or conversation threads. My descriptions of the allegations against Bryan Kohberger are based on the reporting of law enforcement in their documentation provided to support Kohberger's arrest, notably portions of a probable cause affidavit authored in part by Corporal Brett Payne of the Moscow Police Department, which provides a summary of cell phone data, surveillance footage, and other substantive evidence alleged to be associated with Kohberger. I also relied on a variety of other sources for my reporting on Kohberger, including body cam footage and witness statements from the hours surrounding the morning of the homicides. At the time this book went to press, Bryan Kohberger was awaiting trial for the King Road homicides and had maintained his innocence. The prosecution was seeking the death penalty for his alleged crimes. So that concludes While Idaho Slept. I appreciate you guys being here and supporting this series, and until next time, good night.